Winterfell was colder than ever, but something felt even colder in the air, something dangerous. It was the year King Robert Baratheon came north to visit his old friend, Eddard Stark, and to take him back to King's Landing as Hand of the King. Everything seemed peaceful then. Bran still climbed walls, Arya chased cats with wooden swords, and Jon Snow dreamed of joining the Night's Watch. But deep in the shadows, pettier Baelish Littlefinger was already playing his game. Bran had always loved climbing the towers of Winterfell, even though Lady Catelyn warned him not to. One morning, much earlier than usual, Bran climbed the old tower near the broken weirwood stump. He moved silently like a ghost, higher and higher, until he reached a window where he heard voices. He peeked in and saw something that made his heart stop. Littlefinger was there, but not alone. He was speaking to a man Bran didn't recognize, wearing dark robes, whispering in hushed tones about Catelyn Stark and Lysa Arryn. Then Bran heard something even worse: plans to turn the Starks against each other. Littlefinger spoke of secrets, power, and how he would remove Ned Stark from the board before winter truly came. It was not just court gossip, it was plotting. Bran climbed down in panic, almost falling twice. He ran to Arya first. She listened carefully as he explained everything, her face turning pale. Unlike Sansa, Arya never trusted Littlefinger. She thought he was always looking at people like pieces on a game board. She didn't need much convincing. Jon Snow, before he left for the Wall, was also told. Bran begged him to believe what he had seen. Jon looked into Bran's scared eyes and nodded. "I believe you," he said. "We must protect Father." The three of them, Bran, Arya, and Jon, met in the Godswood under the Heart Tree. The weirwood's red eyes watched over them like a silent witness. They knew they couldn't accuse Littlefinger without proof. He was clever, always hiding behind sweet words and lies. But Arya had an idea. She said she could follow him, spy like a shadow, and catch him doing something worse. Arya spent days tailing Littlefinger through the halls of Winterfell, hiding behind walls and barrels, even crawling through tunnels like a rat. One evening she saw him pass a note to a rider, a letter sealed with the Baelish sigil. She couldn't read much, but she caught some words: Eddard Stark, King's Landing, and remove. She rushed to Jon, who was leaving the next day. Jon made a risky decision. He gave the letter to Maester Luwin secretly, telling him to show it to Lord Stark only. Jon didn't explain where it came from. He just said this might save his life. When Eddard read the letter, he didn't show emotion, but something in his eyes changed. He told Maester Luwin to watch Littlefinger closely. That night, Ned told Catelyn quietly, "We have a snake in the walls." As Littlefinger continued his games, moving pawns around the board, he didn't notice that some of the pieces were starting to fight back. The Starks, usually slow to anger, were waking up. Arya found another scroll, later this one from King's Landing. It was hidden under Littlefinger's mattress. When she brought it to Bran and Jon, they finally understood the real danger. Littlefinger was working with Lannisters behind the scenes, trying to create war between families. Before Jon left for Castle Black, he said to Arya, "If you feel danger, don't wait. Strike first. Protect Father." Those words stayed with Arya like a blade tucked in her belt. Littlefinger, smiling as always, had no idea the young wolves were starting to bare their teeth. Winterfell's calm began to crack like ice underfoot. Littlefinger continued playing his part, smiling at Sansa, offering advice to Lady Catelyn, and speaking politely to Lord Stark. But something had shifted. The young wolves, once thought harmless, were watching. Arya sharpened her wooden sword in silence. Her needlework was a failure, but her ears worked better than any servant's. She listened through keyholes and cracks in the stone walls. Every night, she reported back to Bran in the broken tower. He had drawn a map of Winterfell on old parchment, marking all of Littlefinger's movements. One night, Arya caught something that made her blood boil. Littlefinger met with a Lannister rider in the stables under the moonlight. They exchanged a black pouch gold, no doubt, and the man whispered, "The boy rides soon." You know what to do. Arya didn't understand all of it, but she heard the name clearly. Bran. She ran, faster than ever, back to Bran. Her lungs burned as she climbed the tower again. "They're going to hurt you," she said, breathless. "They know you saw something." Bran's face turned pale. He knew exactly what it meant. Littlefinger was trying to silence him. At that moment, their game turned into war. Bran went to Maester Luwin, trembling, and told him everything. This time, he included every detail, what he saw, what Arya heard, the letter Jon had sent, and the meeting in the stables. Luwin was shocked, but did not call them liars. He knew children lied often, but he also knew Littlefinger was not to be trusted. He brought it to Lord Stark that same night. Eddard Stark, a man who always believed in honor and truth, listened in silence. Then he said, "I should have listened sooner." He called for Sir Rodrik and gave one order: "Find Pettier Baelish. Bring him to me, in chains if needed." Littlefinger was found near the crypts, where he often went to reflect. When he was brought before Lord Stark, still in his fine clothes and calm smile, he acted surprised. "What's the meaning of this, Lord Stark?" But Eddard didn't speak first. Arya did. She stepped from behind the pillar, eyes sharp, voice steady. "You tried to kill my brother. You lied to my mother. You betrayed our family." Littlefinger's smile twitched. Bran stepped forward too. "I saw you. I heard you. You were talking about removing father from the board." Littlefinger's eyes finally flickered. The calm broke. "You're just children," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're playing with." Then came the voice from the stairs. "You played with fire, Baelish," said Lady Catelyn, stepping into the room. Her face, once gentle toward him, was now cold as snow. "And now the flames are coming for you." Ned held up the scroll, the one Arya had found under Littlefinger's bed. "This was meant for Lannister hands," Ned said. "A trap you helped set. Tell me, Pettier, how many lives were you ready to trade for a seat at the table?" Cornered, Littlefinger changed. The smooth words fell away. "You think you've won?" he spat. "This is just a backwater in the north. You can chain me, kill me, but the game goes on. You're already part of it." Sir Rodrik seized him, but Littlefinger laughed all the way down the hall. A mad, bitter laugh. Later that night, Arya couldn't sleep. She sat with Bran near the fire. "Did we really stop him?" she asked. Bran stared into the flames. "For now. But he's right about one thing." "What?" "The game's bigger than him." And in the quiet cold of Winterfell, with one spider caught in the web, they didn't yet see the bigger storm rolling from the south, the lions, the crown, and the war that would still come. Word of Littlefinger's arrest spread through Winterfell like wildfire. Servants whispered, guards stayed alert, and the ravens carried messages fast across the north. The Starks had taken a bold step one that would shake the south, but they didn't know just how far the ripples would reach. In the dungeons below Winterfell, Pettier Baelish sat alone, stripped of his silks, his rings, and most importantly, his lies. He smiled to himself, even in chains. "You stopped me," he whispered, "but not the game." He knew the letters he had sent were already in flight. He had planned too well. If one thread broke, others would still pull tight. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei received one such letter, carefully written in Littlefinger's neat hand. Her face darkened as she read, "The Starks grow bold. Lord Eddard has turned against his allies. He prepares to act. Act first." Her anger burned hotter than wildfire. Meanwhile, in Winterfell, Eddard Stark faced a different storm. His children had forced his hand. If it had been his decision alone, perhaps he would have delayed, tried to gather more proof. But their courage and the danger to Bran made him act. Now he wondered if it was too fast, too soon. Catelyn stood beside him in the Great Hall. "He's dangerous," she said of Littlefinger. "I know that now. I knew it once, when we were children, but I forgot." Ned nodded. "Still, he's not the only one we should worry about." He was right. The raven from King's Landing arrived that evening. The royal seal was broken. The message was brief, cold. "Return to the capital. Immediately. Bring your family. His Grace commands it." Signed by Queen Cersei herself. Maester Luwine read it aloud, and silence filled the hall. Arya gritted her teeth. "It's a trap." Sansa, unaware of what had truly happened, was confused. Why would the Queen want to hurt us? Jon Snow, still in Winterfell due to heavy snow delaying his journey to the Wall, stood beside Arya. Because they're not finished playing. Eddard looked at his children and made a decision. He would not take them to King's Landing. He wrote a reply and sealed it with the direwolf's head. "The North remains loyal. But I will not bring my children into danger." Catelyn stayed silent. She agreed, but fear gripped her heart. She had seen what happened to families who defied the crown. War. Always war. Later that night, Bran had a dream. Not just any dream, a vision. The three-eyed raven flew through smoke and ash over burning fields. He saw lions tearing wolves, but then the wolf stood up, larger than ever, eyes glowing white. The raven whispered, "The game broke early, but it still wants blood." He woke up sweating. The next morning, a scout returned from the south gate. "Lannister riders," he said, "a dozen, bearing the Queen's banner." Arya ran to the walls. She saw them tall, proud knights in gold and crimson. Leading them was Sir Jaime Lannister himself, the Kingslayer. He rode into the courtyard without smiling. "Lord Stark," he said, dismounting, "I'm here for a conversation, not blood." "Unless you want blood." Ned met him with northern steel behind him. "Speak, Jaime." Jaime looked around at the Stark children. His eyes paused on Arya, on Bran in his chair, on Jon with Ghost beside him. "You've made a mistake," Jaime said coldly. "Littlefinger was unpleasant, but he was ours." "You've started something," Ned replied calmly. "He tried to kill my son." Jaime raised an eyebrow. "And if I said it wasn't him? That your son stumbled into something bigger?" He leaned closer. "What if I said your son saw something he wasn't supposed to?" Bran stiffened in his chair. Arya stepped forward. "Say it," Jaime smirked. "Children shouldn't climb towers." The room fell silent. Catelyn's breath caught. Jon stepped forward, hand on his sword. "Was it you?" he asked, voice like ice. Jaime turned to him. "Ask your brother." Bran felt his stomach twist. The fall. The window. Two golden heads. He remembered. The truth struck him like a sword to the chest. It wasn't Littlefinger who pushed him. It was Jaime Lannister. And now, everything was worse than before. Bran's breathing grew shallow as the memory returned in full force. The tower, the moans, the two golden-haired figures, and then the cold hand that shoved him into the air. It wasn't just a fall. It was an execution, attempted murder. And now the man who did it was standing right there in Winterfell's courtyard, smirking like it meant nothing. Jon saw Bran's face go pale and didn't wait for a word. He unsheathed Longclaw halfway. Jaime noticed the movement and chuckled. "Ah, the bastard wants blood." Ned raised his hand sharply. "Enough." But the silence that followed was worse than shouting. Catelyn's face twisted in horror. She looked at Jaime, then at Bran. "Is it true?" she asked softly. Bran nodded, eyes brimming with tears. "It was him. He pushed me. He didn't want me to speak." The guards tensed. Sir Roderick's hand was on his sword. Arya was already moving toward Needle. But Jaime wasn't flustered. "Well," he said coolly, "I suppose the truth comes early this time." Ned's voice was steel. "Why?" Jaime glanced at the children, then at Catelyn. "Because your son saw something sacred. Something the realm wouldn't understand. We did what we had to do. You tried to kill my son to protect your sins?" Catelyn shouted. Jaime's mask of calm finally cracked. "No," he said. "I tried to protect my family." "Same as you." A moment was deadly. One word could turn the entire courtyard into a battleground. But Ned knew better. Not yet. Not in the open. Not with children watching. He gave a cold nod to Sir Roderick. "Take him. Chain him. He will answer for his crimes." Jaime looked surprised, then laughed. "You think the Queen will allow that?" "Should try to stop us," Ned said. Let her try. But he knew the weight of what just happened. By imprisoning Jaime Lannister, the Starks had declared war on the crown. That night, the winds howled louder than before. Bran couldn't sleep. The truth haunted him. If he hadn't climbed that tower, if he hadn't looked through that window, would his family still be safe? Would the war have stayed far away? Arya sat by his bedside. "Are you angry?" she asked. Bran shook his head. "I'm scared." "So am I," Arya whispered. "But we're Stark blood. We don't run." Meanwhile, down in the dungeons, Jaime paced like a caged lion. He wasn't afraid. He knew how this game worked. He knew Cersei would not allow this insult to pass unanswered. She would burn Winterfell if she had to, and he would be free again. But deep inside, he also knew something else. This time, the Starks were not playing gently. In King's Landing, Cersei was already preparing her reply. The Raven brought her two messages, one about Littlefinger's arrest, and the other about Jaime's capture. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She smiled. Because war, she knew, would finally give her what she wanted, complete control. And with Robert still drunk every night, it wouldn't be hard. But even as she plotted, someone else watched from the shadows. Varys, the spider, had his own whispers. And one whisper had told him something very strange, that the Starks had uncovered not just Littlefinger's treachery, but the truth about Jaime and Cersei's secret. The game was breaking early. The players were moving out of turn. And far beyond the sea, a girl with silver hair felt the cold wind in her dreams. The dragon stirs. But in Winterfell, the North remembered. And this time, the wolves had drawn blood first. Snow fell heavier the next morning. Winterfell's walls stood tall, silent, and tense, like a beast waiting for an attack. The atmosphere had shifted. Every guard, every servant, even the wolves sensed it. War wasn't coming. War had already started. Only the blood hadn't spilled yet. Lord Eddard Stark stood before the Godswood tree, head bowed, hands clasped. He didn't pray often, but today he needed more than honor. He needed strength. His family was now the first to strike, and every move after this would either save or destroy them. Inside the castle, Jon Snow was packing. The snowstorm that delayed his journey to Castle Black had cleared, and the Night's Watch riders were ready to move. But his heart wasn't. "I should stay," Jon said to Arya. She sat cross-legged on the bench, sharpening needle. "Then stay?" "I gave my word." Arya shrugged, not looking up. "They say honor kills more men than swords." Jon smiled bitterly. "Who told you that?" "You did once." Outside, Sansa watched the prisoners from her window. Littlefinger in one cell, Jaime Lannister in another. Her heart ached with confusion. She had once believed in songs and handsome knights and golden queens. Now all of that was burning. She had adored the Lannisters once, dreamed of marrying Joffrey. But now her uncle by marriage had pushed her brother from a tower, and the queen wanted her family dead. The songs had lied. In the great hall, Catelyn confronted her husband. "You think they'll let this go?" she asked, her voice strained. "They will march on us." Ned nodded. Then we defend our home. But Catelyn wasn't finished. And the rest? You think Robert will choose you over his queen? Over his blood? That was the real question, wasn't it? Because while Cersei plotted war and Jaime sat in chains, the king still sat on the Iron Throne, drunk, distracted, and unaware his best friend had just thrown a sword into the heart of the royal family. Ned finally spoke. I'll write to Robert myself. Tell him everything. About Littlefinger. About Jaime. About what Bran saw. Catelyn's eyes filled with dread. You're trusting truth to save us? I'm trusting Robert, Ned said. For the last time. That evening, the raven flew south. But Cersei had spies even in the skies. By the time the raven passed the neck, a bolt from a crossbow brought it down. The letter never reached King's Landing. Back in the dungeons, Littlefinger sat silently in his cell. But something glinted in his eye. A rat crept through the cracks in the stone. Not a real one. A boy. Dirty-faced, wide-eyed, no older than 10. Message from the Vale, the boy whispered. Littlefinger grinned. Even caged, he had threads. Tell them the lion has fallen into the wolf's den. And remind them. The eagle flies when the lion roars. The boy nodded and vanished. By morning, 3 things happened that shattered the calm again. First, a raven from River Run arrived. Catelyn's brother, Edmure Tully, promised to raise swords if the crown moved north. We will not let the Lannisters harm our blood again, he wrote. Second, Robb Stark returned from the mountains with a dozen bannermen. Though young, his eyes were sharp. You kept this from me, he told his father, angry and proud. But I'm your heir. I will stand with you. And third, another raven came not from the south, but from the east. It carried a simple message. The queen knows. She marches. With fire, the Lannisters were coming. Not just with swords, but with wildfire, rage, and the full weight of the crown behind them. But this time, the North wasn't a quiet land waiting to be conquered. This time, the wolves were ready. The banners of House Stark flew higher that morning-gray direwolves on white field, snapping in the cold wind like they sensed blood in the air. The castle was no longer a home. It was a fortress. War had arrived, not with horns or trumpets, but with silence, sharp steel, and the promise of vengeance. Robb Stark, only 16, stood at the war table beside his father. His jaw was clenched, his voice steadier than ever. We can't wait for them to come to us, he said. If we sit here, we'll be surrounded. Eddard looked at his son and saw a boy who had become a commander overnight. The fire in Robb's eyes reminded him of his own brother. Brandon, the fire that once rushed into danger without fear. But Ned had learned the price of fire. He preferred ice. No, Ned said calmly, we hold Winterfell. Let them come. They'll bleed on our walls. But Robb didn't agree. We need to send a message. Let the Lannisters know this isn't just about honor. It's about strength. He pointed at the map. The twins, Moat Cailin. If we move fast, we can cut them off before they reach the neck. Catelyn entered the room then, her face pale. There's no time, she said. We received another raven from King's Landing this time. Ned took the letter and read it silently. The king was dead. Robert Baratheon had been killed in a hunting accident. Gored by a boar, they said. But Ned knew better. His hand trembled. The ink wasn't even dry before Cersei claimed power for Joffrey. And in bold red wax, the letter ended with a threat. Return the Kingslayer. Swear fealty. Or burn. Catelyn's voice cracked. They murdered him. Jon Snow, standing by the door, said the words no one dared to say aloud. They'll come for us all now. Arya didn't flinch. She held Needle like it was a piece of her soul. But it was Bran quiet, thoughtful Bran, who said something that silenced the room. They killed the king to hide a lie. Ned turned to him. What lie? Bran met his father's eyes. Joffrey isn't Robert's son. The memory of that day in the tower was burned into Bran's mind now. The golden-haired twins. The way Cersei had kissed Jaime like a lover, not a brother. It's Jaime's. I saw them. The truth dropped like a blade into the table. Now it made sense. Why Jaime had pushed him. Why Cersei had acted with such urgency. Why the Lannisters wanted Ned quiet, dead, or bent on one knee. Joffrey had no claim to the throne. He's a bastard, Jon said softly. Born of incest. Ned rubbed his temples. He had suspected. He had read the old records, the Baratheon line all black-haired until this boy. But he hadn't acted fast enough. And now Robert was dead, and a false king sat the Iron Throne. Robb's voice was louder now. Then we don't just defend the North. We expose the truth. We break the lie. That night, the prisoners were moved deeper into Winterfell's old dungeons, Jaime and Littlefinger both. Sir Roderick stood guard himself. No chances were taken. Jaime, in chains, still smiled. You think truth matters? The truth killed your king. The truth will burn your home. But Ned didn't respond. He had already begun writing the letter that would change everything. He wrote to Stannis Baratheon, Robert's true brother, a man cold as winter, but loyal to the law. Joffrey is no rightful heir. The throne belongs to you. The North will support your claim if you rise now. Then he wrote another to every great house that had doubts, fears, or grudges against the Lannisters. The truth would become a weapon. Outside, the snow turned to ice. A cold, cruel storm rolled in from the east, and far beyond the wall, even darker things stirred. But within the walls of Winterfell, the Stark children stood united, their fates now bound by fire, blood, and a truth so dangerous it could topple a kingdom. They didn't just stop Littlefinger. They had declared war on the game itself. Snow buried the fields around Winterfell like a shroud, as if the gods themselves were preparing a grave for what was coming. War was no longer a shadow on the horizon. It was galloping north under crimson banners, led by lions with golden manes and wildfire in their hearts. But the wolves had already tasted blood, and this time they would not run. Inside the great hall, the air was thick with tension. Lords of the North Karstark, Umber, Mormont had answered the call. They stood shoulder to shoulder with Robb Stark, their eyes hard and ready. The Lannisters marched with 10,000 men, Sir Roderick reported, led by Tywin himself. They're bringing the mountain clans. They want vengeance for Jaime. Robb stepped forward. Then let them come. Let them freeze under our walls. Eddard placed a hand on his son's shoulder, proud but grim. This isn't just a battle, Robb. This is a reckoning. Meanwhile, word from the east arrived in the form of a raven with black feathers and an unfamiliar seal. The Vale would not support the crown's move. Lysa Arryn had received Littlefinger's secret message, but instead of aiding the Lannisters, she declared neutrality. The Vale shall remain untouched, she wrote. Littlefinger's plan had failed. And yet, locked in Winterfell's dungeons, he still smiled. You've ruined everything, Ned told him during one last visit. Baelish tilted his head. Or maybe I just gave you a head start. You sent that raven to your own queen. Why? Littlefinger leaned forward. Because the game is meant to be played by those willing to sacrifice everything. You Starks. You still believe in rules. But this time, Ned said coldly, the wolves made the first move. Down the corridor, Jaime Lannister stared through the bars, no longer smug, no longer uncheckable. His face was bruised. Robb had paid him a visit, and the boy had left with blood on his knuckles. I'll kill you for what you did to my brother, Robb had told him. Jaime had only said one thing in return. Then you'll be just like me. But the boy hadn't flinched. Above on the battlements, Jon Snow looked toward the icy south. He was still meant to ride for the wall, but now he hesitated. Lord Commander Mormont had sent word. We need you, but do what you must. The North is at war. Jon stood beside Ghost, and Arya joined him. "They think you're going to leave," she said. "I was," Jon replied. "But something tells me the wall will still be there after this." Arya smiled slightly. "Needles thirsty." He ruffled her hair. "You're more Stark than half the lords downstairs." And deep beneath the castle, Bran had another vision stronger this time. He saw flames. Not Lannister fire, but dragon fire. A silver-haired queen walking through ashes. He saw a wall of ice cracking, and something cold and dead behind it. But he also saw the direwolf, bigger than any beast, howling so loud the stars shook. When he awoke, his voice echoed through the room. "The South isn't our only enemy." Catelyn looked at him, shaken. "What did you see?" "Darkness," Bran said, voice hollow. "And it's not just coming from them." That very night, the war began. Tywin Lannister's scouts reached the northern road, only to find it abandoned. The Starks had pulled back. Too far, the Lannisters thought. But it was a trap. At Moat Cailin, Robb struck with fury. He led a swift cavalry charge through the marshes, cutting off Lannister supply lines. Karstark men ambushed the vanguard. Lord Umber took 3 heads before he was even off his horse. It wasn't just a battle. It was a massacre. When word reached Tywin, he knew this was no longer the naive wolf pack he expected. This was a pack that had tasted betrayal and blood and chosen not to kneel, but to bite back. And in King's Landing, Cersei's face turned pale when she read the next raven. "The North does not recognize your boy king. Joffrey is illegitimate. The Starks support Stannis Baratheon. Release Jaime, or prepare for war on all fronts." Her hands trembled. Varys, watching from the shadows, whispered to himself, "The game has broken. And when rules break, monsters crawl through the cracks." The North had done what no one expected. They had outplayed the players. And this time, the throne wouldn't be decided in the capital. It would be decided in the snow, by wolves who chose to fight the game, not play it.